Hey everyone, it's Justin with a KTOD special today looking at the early Set 3 meta. So last weekend was release weekend. People were getting their boxes, they were opening packs, they were exploring Set 3, seeing what we could do with it, also exploring the Boba ban. And now we've got our first weekend ahead of us where we're really looking at some slightly larger tournaments. We've got SCG Columbus coming up. And then obviously there's just 1Ks and larger events that are sort of scattered around. So this is the first weekend also that has some data from the sort of very first release weekend where you saw some of new Set 3 decks and meta. So now it's sort of our first large weekend, also with some reactions. So I'm going to take us through some decks and leaders that I think we're going to see make a big impact in the early stages of the meta, and also sort of the risers post Boba ban. Obviously, metas evolve and things pop up and things shift, but these are my sort of picks for the decks you could expect to see at the top tables. Like I said, at the SCG, that's what I'd expect to see, and any other big events. It's really an exciting time for deck building and Star Wars Unlimited in general. I know that our Discord has been super active in the deck threads, just people chopping up new ideas. And sort of without further ado, I actually got a hit. You can see also, real quick, before we hit the first deck on the list, I want to point out showcases. I opened a showcase live on our Discord last week. I was opening a box and I opened a Rex showcase. Spoiler alert, Rex is not on our list. I wish he was. But I excited to see the showcases and on the top tables too. So our first deck, and I actually think this potentially could be the best deck out the gate, is Jango Fett Tarkin Town Space. It's a triple Dark Raid deck. My partner in crime, Mike Gem, aka Bobby Sapphire, won a store showdown with a deck that we sort of came up with together inside of our testing group and then shared it with the rest of the crew in the KTOD Discord, which was really utilizing the tap effect with Jango Fett on cards like Ruthless Raider, which was already a fantastic card to hit off of Triple Dark Raid, but now you've got an even better avenue to tap things down. You're this space deck that's sort of racing anyway, and you don't have much in the ground lane, but now you're able to play units and just tap things down. So the Elite P38 Starfighter is also fantastic at this. It comes into play. It taps down any unit, including a leader, which is huge. You're already combining that with ISB Agent Tarkin Town as this little mini combo to kill their first turn. And then the interesting thing that we noticed in testing early, it's obvious now, which is that ISB Agent, it's out, and now can actually sort of attack something in the middle of the game and tap it down. Maybe it kills itself, but it's able to tap down a larger unit. So it can potentially kill the first thing in conjunction with Tarkin Town, and then just stay out there and tap down a unit, or just sort of needle them in and get in for a few damage, and then tap down like a leader on its flip turn. So it's sort of, you have to answer that, which is sort of an annoyance. But yeah, Jango Fett, we banned Boba Fett, and now Jango's there, pointing out absolutely beautiful art on the showcase. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting that one. Yeah, just a really, really strong deck. It races really well. It's super aggressive, but then it doesn't sort of fade out in the end game, because you've got Ruthless Raider and you've got Fett's Fire Spray, and then with Triple Dark Raid, you're playing them once, then you're playing them again, and your hand, even though you are somewhat dumping your hand, the deck plays a lot of early units. You're doing so much earlier. Your leader comes out on 5. You're really putting these control decks in pressure points. So if you're thinking like, oh yeah, it's too mid range, I'm going to get beaten by the control decks, it's very possible, but you are putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the opponent, very similar to a Sabine aggro deck into control, which has traditionally been a good matchup for Sabine. So I think this deck's here to stay. I think the ability to tap things down is huge. I think you have to, if you're building other decks, you have to adapt. And you have to adapt in sort of that strategy. So our next deck on the list is actually a deck that I think is still very strong. It's one of my personal favorites, which is Sabine ECL. But to the point of having to adapt to the Django deck, I do think that you have to be aware of the meta, right? So you see one of the cards that I highlighted here was Bright Hope, and it's a 4-cost card, and it is now in my deck, and the Darksaber is gone from my deck. And the reason being is Darksaber goes on Sabine, and then they just play, the Django deck can play essentially any number of units or attack with like an ISB agent that's just been hanging around and taps down my unit that has the Darksaber, and that's no fun. So the Bright Hope obviously is a Sentinel space unit, so it's sort of a plus value there to have this great Sentinel space unit, probably the best card in a vacuum against these triple Dark Raid decks is Bright Hope. So I'm basically taking out a card that's not very good against tap down strategies in the Darksaber and replacing it with a card that is really good in Bright Hope. So I like Sabine. It's able to adapt, as I just described, this sort of, take one card out, put another card in, and it just plays really, really strong, aggressive cards. You're able to obviously flip your leader early. We've talked about Sabine in this channel a ton. I will tell you, my list currently has 0 set 3 cards in the main deck, but it has changed, as we see, as I've just talked about. Bright Hope is in the main. That's because of a set 3 reaction. But yeah, it's still, in my estimation, still one of the top decks. Poe, there was some initial conversation in our crew about, do you take out Poe now because Boba's gone and you can even get lower to the ground. I played exactly one match without Poe and said, nope, that's wrong. Let's get Poe back in the deck. So Poe's not going anywhere. We are seeing early in metas that oftentimes aggro sometimes is king, and a card that is absolutely fantastic in these aggro mirrors is Rebel Salt. Going back to that sort of a new world of Django tapping down all these units, well, if you're able to first action after maybe you've claimed because they've tapped something down, you have no other recourse but to claim, you can actually play this on the very first action of your next turn and attack with your tuning units before the opponent, your 2 best units before the opponent has an opportunity to tap them down or ambush them or something along those lines. So Rebel Assault's a great card. Steals in action. Poe's great. Bright Hope's great. Sabine ECL is great. I expect this deck to be a contender all the way through set 3 meta and beyond. All right. Next one on the list is Ray Control with Tarkin Town. So Ray Red Tarkin Town. Sort of this mid-rangey control. It can play a few different angles. It's a control deck that gets to play the A-Wing, sort of some aggressive cards, Cassian Andor. It's able to play these early units, buff them, and sort of still take an aggressive approach, but then it's able to play cards like Luke Skywalker and Crate Dragon and the very powerful Force Throw. So I don't think this deck is going anywhere. It's able to heal. You're able to play units like Yoda and Keenan Jarrus, which have to be great into maybe Jango Fett, and it has a pretty good matchup against Sabine. I think as good as any in this sort of realm of 25-point base, because you do have some restore and you've got the ability to kill early units and sort of turn the corner pretty quickly with Rey and Luke Skywalker. I don't think it's an easy matchup, but it's certainly one that you can navigate to feeling like you're able to win that. You don't have to worry about Boba anymore. I do think the Django deck, while it is incredibly powerful, I could see it struggling against Rey. Rey can get to that turning point. And then the Django deck, even though it's able to tap some of the restore units, it's not that the opponent from the Django is never going to be able to attack with the units. So it's going to be able to deal some damage back. You've got the Space Sentinel for 3, which is a nightmare for the Django decks. So I would expect that Ray Control is pretty well positioned. I still don't love it into villain control, but you've certainly got angles there, right? You've got Force Throw, you've got Pillage, you have the endgame of Crate Dragon, you've got a reasonable amount of Smuggle with Cassian and Chewbacca. You don't have a ton of it, but you have enough that, if you're in top deck mode, you can still get there and outgrind people. So I think Ray Control is a really strong deck. It had some real strong finishes and PQs towards the end of the season. And it was, from my estimation, people liked the Boba matchup, but I think it's going to like a lot of these mid-range matchups and people as they sort of are dirtling. You have a clear plan, and you can go long and go short with Ray. Next on the list is Han Solo Cunning. You can see the top 2 cards from set 1, Cunning and Millennium Falcon, 2 very strong legendaries. This deck had some PQ success. One of the harder decks to play. It's got the Tech DJ combo. You're able to do some very powerful things by playing a 3-drop on the first turn of the game, and then chaining your Han flip earlier to go to 6 resources, then go to 7 resources, then play Han Solo unit or DJ from row. You're able to do a lot of really interesting stuff here. And Yellow Hero got a lot of help in set 3. You got Plo Koon, I think is one of the most powerful cards. R2-D2 was super powerful, although I do think he has a little bit of tension in the Han deck with sort of the amount of like discarding a card from your hand and also putting a card down using Han's ability does put a bit of tension on your deck. So I do think R2 makes the cut, but he's not quite as seamless as he would be in some other Yellow Hero decks. But I think Han's incredibly powerful. It has a pretty good matchup against Sabine. It has a pretty good matchup against Control once you get your reps in. I don't think it has a great matchup against the Django deck. I think, your Cunning +4 is essentially useless. You can use it to tap down the board some. And Falcon's obviously great, but Tarkin Town early is tough for your early 3-drop. And then cards like Ruthless Raider and Fett's Fire Spray are pretty tough to deal with. So I could see it struggling a bit there. I do think it probably has some avenues where it could maybe have a sideboard plan or tweak the main deck a little bit, maybe a little bit more bounce. Maybe the new card Emphasis could end up being very powerful there. But I do think that's a matchup that you'd certainly want to vet if you're planning on taking Han to any of these big tournaments. All right, last on my list, so I guess it's really a top 5 decks that we should expect to see into this early set 3 meta is Bosk Blue. So it doesn't get a ton of new cards, and one of its matchups that I'd probably like to see more of, Boba, is gone. And I think initially we thought that we'd probably see a lot more Sabine, just in a giant number early on. That's still very possible it could happen, but if Django becomes a larger market share of the meta, I could see Bosk Blue being pretty solid. Being able to jam a removal spell, a card like Perilous Position is really cool. It's one of the newer cards. You've got draw engines in here, obviously the bounties, cards like the heal 4 or 6 bounty. The name's escaping me right now. That doubles once Bosk flips. Being able to ping aggressive units with your Bosk ability seems really strong. We're seeing the Django deck. Keep referring to the Django deck, but it's the new sort of hot deck in the world right now. Plays cards like Stormtrooper and Greedo, and being able to play 1 toughness units against Bosk is not very good, clearly. So I could see Bosk Blue being a pretty strong contender, and just seeing how some of the new removal actually interacts with the Sabine matchup, which, while it wasn't great previously, it definitely Bosk Blue could win its share of games against Sabine if it was able to stabilize. So I could see Bosk Blue making an impact, and also really farming some of the mid-range decks that might be popping up. You might have some of these sort of more middling, Quinlan type decks. I could see Bosk Blue really shining there. All right, so we've got a few sleepers as well, a couple leaders, and also I'm going to talk about a very specific card. Both Quinlan and Anakin have impressed me in ways. I don't think they're there yet. We haven't really seen a list out there that's hey, this list is the clear pathway to maybe some future lists. There were some Anakin lists in the first wave of the TTS League. Yeah, I think that Anakin and Quinlan have potential, right? Anakin is this interesting thing where he allows all your units to sort of attack up, similar to like a Han where you're able to play units earlier. Anakin's able to let your like earlier units attack up, which is neat. And Quinlan's just like a 5 cost 3/7 leader, which we see with Django, and we saw with Boba Fett before as being a 4/7. Flips on the 5th turn or the 4th turn, 5 resource turn. So that kind of demands your immediate attention. And he's in, yellow, which got a lot of help. It has the R2, he's a force unit, so you can combine him with some interesting set 3 cards like now there are 2 of them, or what's the lightsaber, the General's Blade, that potentially do some broken stuff by jamming a very early big unit. So I would keep an eye on these 2. Again, I don't think the lists are there yet. And then the last card is Overwhelming Barrage. So right now I have some decks built in real life, and Overwhelming Barrage is in none of these decks that I just talked about, and none of the ones that I have built. So it's very possible there's a Kira deck out there. There's like a blue-green villain deck that plays Overwhelming Barrage, maybe a Krennic. But that's a card. I think it's the most powerful card in the game, and it's not in any of my top 5 sort of likely decks. So I think there's certainly a list out there that's playing Overwhelming Barrage. Could be even like a Bosk ECL deck with a new Maul unit. Could be a lot of things. We see the General Grievous unit's a 4/4, comes out on turn 3. That means that you have another early unit to play before Barrage, similar to like a Lom Pike that you can then Barrage for 6. So it's very possible that like a Kira ECL or even like a Kira 30 point is the top deck around. So we'll see about that. Also could be, who knows, maybe a Tarkin deck emerges with Overwhelming Barrage. That is in my Tarkin deck, so I guess I misspoke about that. So yeah, exciting times. I'm really looking forward to seeing like the SCG Columbus meta shake out and what really ends up being in the top 8. One guarantee we have is we will not have 8 Boba Fetts in the top 8. Although I guess it could be 8 Boba hero leaders, but that's maybe highly unlikely. So I'm really excited about watching the results come in this weekend from, I believe SCG events have a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then obviously there'll be lists coming in over the weekend. And as the meta sort of starts taking form. So that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed the content, and happy gaming.